2 years ago, I got a phone call from the general counsel of a major Fortune 10 American company. And he told me that there was a shareholder meeting of the company in the US, and pro-Palestinian activists had actually found their way into the shareholders meeting by buying shares, and had thrown fake blood on the floor and had fielded a boycott Israel agenda for the shareholders meeting. And that had entirely disrupted this, $150 billion company's shareholder meeting. And so the director general of the company, the CEO of the company, who was so angry at this, actually sent a memo saying we need to rethink our Israeli operations because it's obviously causing us a lot of problems. And so I was actually consulted by the company to understand what the risks they would be taking if they decided to divest from Israel. Obviously, what I actually did was I convinced them to forget about it and to fight BDS in the US. But I tell you this story because American companies, American organizations, American unions are under a constant barrage of these type of attempts to convince them to boycott Israel and participate in the delegitimization and BDS campaign. And we have a unique opportunity here, as David will now tell us, on the view from the inside, from the US, how do you deal with such attempts when you're not Israeli, you're just a friend of Israel, and you're looking at us from the outside? Please, David Hoffa.
Thank you very much, and I'm very happy to be here. I actually was filling in for somebody else, American labor leader, who was supposed to be discussing anti-BDS. But I think I'm uniquely positioned to talk about this because of the work that my family and my father and the organization that I'm part of has done. To hear the story about the company and then also the Dutch lawsuit, that's some scary stuff. In the United States, I think the tide is turning against BDS. I think we're getting people are realizing that this is not a legitimate way to engage anybody. By disengaging, I don't think you get anywhere. And I think that's exactly the point, was to try and keep peace from happening, keep conversations from happening. So the labor movement in the United States is unique because not only do they have a lot of political influence, but they also have their own money. The Teamsters Union, for example, which my father is president of and my grandfather was also president of, both friends of Israel, both people who had been here, they have just under $100 billion in pension money. So that alone, if you consider that separate from cities and counties and states, you basically have a lot of money where if someone were to get to that and to say, hey, you know what, Israel's an occupier, we need you to implement a BDS program, you could really do some damage. So it's very, very important to have a friend that actually is in the labor movement and can control that. So as the people who have perpetuated the BDS movement have reached out to the labor movement knowing all this, you've seen a lot of people come in without a lot of information and without a lot of research. Some of these unions, not the Teamsters unions, but a lot of other unions have bought into it. And they said, that makes a lot of sense. This is a terrible thing that's happening here. We have to stop it. Show them some pictures of some of the terrible things that have happened. And they buy into it. One of the ones that bought into it was the United Auto Workers. United Auto Workers is a great union. It's big, controls a lot of money. In University of California, which is a huge organization, they had tried to push, they adopted a BDS policy, and they were trying to get the University of California to implement that policy. Now, I don't think they would listen to a lot of different people. If you had someone from here come over there and say, hey, you really shouldn't do this, maybe they would listen. If they had someone from one of the companies that they're going to divest from say, please don't do this, we don't think it's a good idea, they may not listen. But if you get one of the more powerful labor leaders in the country, which the 1.2 million person Teamsters Union, and a letter from the Teamsters Union saying, hey, listen, we've been to Israel. Some of our people are past honorees of the American Friends Yitzhak Rabin Center, which I am a vice president of that, is now called the Yitzhak Rabin Foundation, has been to Israel, has seen it firsthand. and you see that it's not the way to go. And so when you get a letter, when the UAW gets a letter from the Teamsters Union, I think it makes a bigger difference. And in fact, what actually happened is the Teamsters Union had talked the UAW out of their BDS stance. And so they actually switched over, so they switched sides, saying, yeah, you're right, that's not the way to go. The most interesting part of the American labor movement is that the UAW represents workers in Caterpillar, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics. Think about that. Think about how insane that is to actually say, well, we're gonna divest from Israel, but then we're actually going to kill our own jobs. I think it makes zero sense. And so I think that they finally realized that. I don't know how they got to that point, but that was pointed out in the letter that the Teamsters wrote. Well, why is this important? Well, because I think the tide has turned. As he had mentioned, a lot of states, I guess now the 10th state, did they finally make it? I think finally voted to say that, okay, we are going to adopt an anti-BDS policy. It's legitimate to do business here, and that's also a way to engage. It's a way to have jobs here and a way to have jobs at home. And I think between our two countries, the United States and Israel, I think you really have a unique relationship, and we need to keep that going. So we're not stopping that for anybody. My family has had a connection to Israel, as he had alluded to, for a while. My grandfather raised a bunch of money back in the 50s with some other folks to bring over here. It was a dark time here when you really couldn't get money, I guess. And he came over here in 1957 and met all the leadership here. I hope that helped. I think it did. One of the things that my father and I have always wanted to do, and my brother also, was to come over here. And so my father was an honoree of the Yitzhak Rabin Center back in 2008. We had a huge dinner, raised a bunch of money, and then came over here with a bunch of other labor leaders and business leaders. And why is that important? Well, it's important because you're able to actually get people here who matter, who can multiply their efforts and continue to be an emissary, essentially, for this process. It's to say, I've been there, because it's easy to talk about a place when you've never been there, because you just read about it, you read what other people write, and you don't form your own opinion because it's not yours. If you actually go and you get a lot of people, we've probably put hundreds of people through that program where we've brought leadership over here from the United States. And these people go back and they're able to say, if someone, like some BDS movement thing comes up, or any other argument about Israel, they're able to say, hey, wait a minute, no, I was there. Here's what it's like. It's not like that at all. And why don't you go there? Why don't you go check it out before you start telling people things? So it's pretty interesting. I think that's one of the things that the Yitzhak Rabin Foundation has been doing. I think we're going to continue to do that. Tiny bit about me at the end. We're engaging in Israel. My law firm that I work for, we do class action securities cases, and this is a country that we're very, very involved in. But the interesting part of that is most of my clients are not here. They're the American labor movement. They're actually pension funds in the United States. So firsthand, if this ever came up, I actually deal with these people on a daily basis. So you now have an emissary in me to make sure that doesn't happen. So in conclusion, I just think I think the tide has turned, and that is a great tide to turn, because I think that's the wrong way to go. The world is seeing it. Hopefully other countries will see it like the United States is. So that's it. Exactly on time.
A 5-minute lip service to the fact that we were supposed to be called a panel by actually my fielding. We don't even have time for that? Oh, so that was your panel. Thank you, Raja. Thank you, everyone, for participating, and thank you all for being here.